So after fearing the worst or even a potential stint on injured reserve, it looks like a very key Chiefs player avoided disaster and could find himself playing sooner rather than later. Then, super team or not, the Eagles have a couple of weaknesses on their roster worth looking into and might also be without a key player on their offense this Sunday. So I've got to break all that down. Travis Kelce weighing in about the collision with Worthy. Then I'll look into this upcoming game, including an updated injury report and even a bit of an update on Tyreek Hill trade rumors. But first, how about those? All right, first up, Travis Kelce spoke about the unfortunate collision between he and Xavier Worthy, game one against the Chargers, and he spoke about that this morning on his podcast. Kelce said he was supposed to be running his route at depth for Worthy, and he didn't, so it was frustrating because he's a 13-year veteran in the league and knows better, and of course also felt terrible about the entire thing. I will say, I do think Kelce was being a real leader here and taking complete accountability, but there have been others that pointed out it looks like Worthy also went a little too deep on his route and tried to correct course. Kelce then got shoved Worthy's direction by Derwin James, I believe it was, in coverage, which didn't help things at all. And so I think the quote-unquote fault is probably a little bit on each guy, and I chalk it up more as a fluke accident than anything else. Regardless, that shouldn't happen to a Chiefs team that runs crossers like this all the time. It's extremely unfortunate and now has the state of the Chiefs wide receiver room in a semi-similar spot to last year, down your two top receivers. In 2024, it was Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice, as Worthy was still a rookie. And this year, it's Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Sure, Rice will return week 7, thankfully, while Worthy is currently week to week with his shoulder after getting it dislocated on the third play in Brazil. He should be back at some point wearing a shoulder brace to help stabilize it, and Andy Reid actually spoke to the media today addressing some news about Xavier Worthy. Kind of good news. Big Red said that Jalen Royals and Xavier Worthy are the only two players that won't work at practice today. They are making progress, getting better every single day. Worthy is rehabbing that shoulder, but it certainly doesn't seem like either of those two will be playing in this game. For Royals, Andy said it would be a stretch for him to play, so he probably won't. Regarding Worthy, here's the good news. Andy said that surgery is not being considered, and it doesn't seem like short-term IR is going to be a thing for him either, at least at this point in time. That means Worthy should be back here sooner rather than later, but we will see how he handles his rehab and his body responds as they ramp him up in his recovery process. That does have me breathing a sigh of relief because yesterday, the Chiefs signed wide receiver Hal Presley to the practice squad. He was on the Chiefs' 90-man roster this past offseason and preseason before cutdowns, and I thought that might signify a potential move to short-term IR for Xavier Worthy. Well, instead, they terminated the practice squad contract of linebacker Cole Christensen to make room for Hal Presley. So this seems to be more of a just-in-case move here for emergency depth with both Xavier Worthy and Jalen Royals probably not playing in this game. Speaking of receivers, Hollywood Brown spoke to the media today, and while he did have 10 catches on 16 targets, by the way, is the fourth most targets in a single game in the Mahomes era, which is pretty crazy. And yes, he had 16 targets, 10 catches, 99 yards. However, Hollywood said he wasn't really happy with his performance on Friday. It felt like he hadn't played football in quite a while, which is true. He looked rusty, especially early on, but settled in later. And therefore, Hollywood said he's putting in a lot of work this week. Expect to see a lot more from him in this game against the Eagles. That's for sure. He's going to be one of the primary targets for Patrick Mahomes. Next up, someone else we should expect to see a lot of on Sunday on Philadelphia is one of their best defensive players in defensive tackle Jalen Carter. He was suspended one game for spitting on Dak Prescott after the opening kickoff last week, with the caveat from the NFL being that since Carter didn't actually play a single snap on the field before being ejected, the game last week counts as his one-game suspension. To further drive this home, as any player, when they are suspended, he had to forfeit his game check from last week, and Carter was also fined just over $57,000. Moving forward, it seems like if somebody does something like this, spits on another player, it will now become a one-game suspension, and that's never happened previously, so it does set a new precedent for sure, and whether you love or hate how the league handled this, that's it. It's been decided, and Carter is going to be a big piece of Philly's defense in this one. However, there are some weaknesses on this Eagles roster I think the Chiefs can exploit, and I talk about that and much more in this quick hitter game preview interview with Thomas Mott. He's got a YouTube channel with over 100,000 subs and covers the Birds every single day. And here's what he had to say, starting with a weakness to watch out for on the Eagles defense.
The big concern in Philadelphia right now is super obvious. It's the second cornerback slot. It's Adoree Jackson, who reportedly is going to start again, although a lot of Eagle fans are hoping he's going to be benched. He's going to be out there. He's going to be your cornerback opposite of Quinton Mitchell. If there's one big glaring red flag from the entire offseason was Howie Roseman deciding to let Darius Slay go and let Isaiah Rodgers go and put his faith in Keely Ringo, who then lost the starting cornerback job, and now it's Adoree Jackson. And he got really worked against CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens in that opener, which it's CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I think a lot of Eagle fans are hopeful. A Xavier Worthy-less, Kansas City Chief receiver room will not be as dangerous, but that is the one area, especially on defense, where Bird fans are really, I'd say, very concerned. Every single day I have people DMing me saying, like, when are we going to trade for a cornerback? When are we going to sign a cornerback? Because they're that worried. Offensively, though, I do think people are a little bit curious about Kevin Patullo play calling because Philadelphia won that game against Dallas. Their offense was very good. Jalen Hurts was very on target, on time, ran the football well. Saquon only had 60 yards on the ground. 1 target for A.J. Brown, only 3 for Devontae Smith. I think Kevin Patullo, being a first-time play caller, was being a little bit over-conservative. Eagle fans want to see him do a little bit more of the attacking because they have that great, obviously, weapon set that you talked about earlier.
That's a good question mark and a good point with Kellen Moore moving on and you guys promoted from within. How is that play calling going to look? There was a lot of hate on Jalen Hurts last week with the ADOT stuff. I don't care, dude. Win the game. Mahomes has been crapped on for 2 years about ADOT. Who cares? Win the game. Take what the defense gives you and win the freaking game. Now, that is going to be interesting to see if there's any wrinkles the new play caller can present. I'm concerned a little bit just from week 1 Chiefs and the Spags defense for sure. They came out flat. They were not ready. They were not prepared. They were missing assignments. They were tripping over each other. And that's not even to include Worthy and Kelce running into each other as well and Worthy being out. So I have some concerns on defense for sure. But if I go back to what you said at the beginning, I was very excited to have Adoree Jackson starting, especially considering you were going to have Tyquan Thornton and Worthy, who was going to be the primary guy for sure. And now you don't have Worthy. And that is a big blow considering Rice is also suspended. I do think the Chiefs offense will come in a little bit more prepared than they were last week because you lost Worthy 3 plays in. It's kind of like the Eagles defense losing Jalen Carter literally before the first play because he was being an idiot. But you guys had to adjust on the fly on defense. Then the Chiefs had to adjust on the fly on offense. The only bummer now is Worthy's not going to be out there at all, but you will have Jalen Carter. So, okay, cornerback 2, play calling. Where do you think the Eagles are going to maybe present some unfair matchups even on the defensive side of the ball?
I think front 7, going back to the Super Bowl, is something that everybody outside Philadelphia has overlooked in terms of the Eagles, because the entire storyline was like the Eagles lose all these defensive pieces. They lost Milton Williams, the highest paid free agent in all of football, the New England Patriots, defensive lineman. Josh Sweat got a massive contract. He was a massive, game wrecker in the Super Bowl. And yet internally, I think most Eagle fans would argue that the front 7, even from linebacker up, is maybe better than it was last year. First off, you have Jahad Campbell, the rookie linebacker, who Eagle fans think is literally the second coming of Fred Warner. They think, and I agree, but people think this kid is going to be absolutely insanely legit. He had one of the highest grades of any defender, of all the rookie defenders in week 1, alongside the All-Pro Zach Bond. That is a matchup nightmare for anybody, not named the Kansas City Chiefs. And I do think the pass rushers are going to really try to flex their muscles in this game. They got after Dak Prescott, but they didn't get a sack. And yet Josh Uche, who's a brand new free agent addition, was the highest graded pass rusher of the entire week 1, higher than Nick Bonita and higher than Trey Hendrickson. Like, his pass rush win rate was almost 50%. He just didn't quite get to Dak Prescott. And so you go back to the Super Bowl, the only reason the Kansas City Chiefs could move the ball is because Mahomes had no time. I mean, he literally was hit on every single play, sacked 5-6 times, whatever the number was, and you just really seemed to rattle him. And I think Philadelphia, with Jalen Carter back this week, who, yes, is an idiot, but if I was the Chiefs, I mean, he's going to be extra motivated to play very well in this game. I'd be terrified of Jalen Carter. The front 4 and the front 7 are where I think Philadelphia can really get after Patrick Mahomes, and hopefully they can emphasize the pressure on the quarterback because they're not as worried about George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb beating them. It's Tyquan Thornton, shout out Baylor, my alma mater, and then, Juju Smith-Schuster, whoever else you guys have there on the outside. So I do think if the Chiefs cannot protect Patrick Mahomes, and it's even half of what the Super Bowl game was, it could be a long day for Patrick Mahomes, which is crazy to think about, but Philadelphia has the blueprint. Why not just go ahead and execute it again?
Xavier Worthy was on a podcast before week 1 dropped, and he said, hey, if you watch the film on the Super Bowl, he's like, some guys were open.
I saw that, yes.
But Mahomes had no time for that to actually form into a real play because the trenches were dominated. I do have a little bit more optimism about the Chiefs O-line, even though there's a weakness there on the left guard spot that does terrify me if it's Jalen Carter against Kingsley Suamataia. I don't love that. He did a pretty good job last week, but it's the quick losses that he can sustain. He just gets on random, very important downs, will get instant L. If you watch the Chargers game, one of those plays was 4th and 7, where Mahomes had to scramble right and Superman out of bounds throw to Hollywood for 50 yards. Well, Kingsley lost this fast, and Mahomes had to scramble out to try to make something happen. So that's a key matchup I'm going to watch, even though I do have a little more optimism as a whole because Josh Simmons already as a rookie looks more serviceable than any other left tackle the Chiefs had playing over there last year. In the Super Bowl, you had Joe Thuney's awesome. He's not a left tackle. So you had Joe Thuney at left tackle and Caliendo at left guard. I have a little bit more optimism there. I know you guys lost a couple key players in free agency, and when you say you think the D-line could be better this year, my hope is that'll be later in the season because I think some of those guys are still going to need to figure it out, and they're on the rise. But hopefully they're not where you want them to be fully week 2 coming into Arrowhead.
Well, I mean, one of the main things that I'm very curious in this game, like defensively is one thing, and I do think it can be Philadelphia's defense gets after Patrick Mahomes. It's not going to be, at least I hope it is, but I don't think it's going to be the Super Bowl drubbing defensively that it was. My big question is going to be Steve Spagnuolo versus Philadelphia's offense, because the one thing about Philadelphia's offense that the outside world sees, that the inside world tries to defend against.
And before I get to Thomas's full answer here, it's worth hearing out for sure. With the Chiefs' first home game being this weekend at Arrowhead, as well as the MLB playoffs right around the corner, and even the NBA not too far behind that, now is the time to get yourself some tickets, and is exactly where the sponsor of today's video, SeatGeek, comes right in. They are the #1 rated ticketing app for a reason, boasting over 28 million downloads with more than 70,000 events listed on their site and app. And speaking of their app, I really do prefer using it because it is that easy to navigate. And on top of all the sporting events going on, you can't forget about concerts, comedians, and festivals. Basically, you name it, there is a very good chance there are tickets on SeatGeek. They make the process super easy for you as well, rating tickets on a scale of 1 to 10 so you know you're getting a good deal. Just look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. On top of that, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and you know I had to come through for you guys. You can use code HBTC10 for 10% off your next set of tickets on SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code HBTC10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thanks again, SeatGeek.
My big question is going to be Steve Spagnuolo versus Philadelphia's offense, because the one thing about Philadelphia's offense that the outside world sees, that the inside world tries to defend against, is that the outside world will watch a game of Jalen Hurts against the Cowboys, and he, dinks and dunks and checks down and runs the football and doesn't hit a 50-yard bomb to A.J. Brown, and they go, oh, the Eagles' offense is just so basic, and I can't believe they don't utilize these weapons. And yet, if you go back and watch the Super Bowl, that was maybe Jalen Hurts' best game as a pro. He carved up Steve Spagnuolo's defense without Saquon Barkley. And so as you go into this game, obviously Spagnuolo is going to have adjustments. I mean, they're clearly going to have to look at the game film from Super Bowl 59 and go, how do we make sure this doesn't happen? But how are the Eagles going to counter? And is that going to be more Saquon Barkley? Are they going to find ways to get him maybe on the outside running instead of the inside? Because they don't run him enough on the outside, in my opinion. Or are they just going to let Jalen Hurts loose? Because it does feel like in these big games, especially against the top AFC quarterbacks and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, in those games where Philadelphia knows they need to score points to win, they just unleash the handcuffs from Jalen Hurts sometime. They let him throw the football deep, and he's done a very good job. His record versus Mahomes, minus the other Super Bowl, but at least statistically, has been fantastic. And so the chess match of the second rematch in really less than 3 games, because you go back to the Super Bowl was 2 games ago, Spags versus Hurts with a new offensive coordinator. How is Philadelphia going to attack? And are they going to just let him do whatever he wants and throw like crazy? Are they going to be more conservative because they trust the defense versus Mahomes and that offense? That, to me, is the big question mark this weekend, is how is Philadelphia going to attack the Chief defense?
That's a big problem to me about the Eagles offense, is because you said Jalen Hurts did this without Saquon, but Saquon was on the field, and you have to account for that.
He was.
Yeah, so the Chiefs did a decent job of limiting the run. They've done that time and time again, really. Derrick Henry, I don't know that it really matters. They've done a good job of not allowing the game to be decided on the ground, but because you have to account for somebody like Saquon, yeah, it's really opening up some of these pass catchers. Jalen Hurts made him pay. I actually feel a little bit better about the Chiefs defense in the Super Bowl than I did the offense because of the pick six, the fumble that was recovered. They had some short fields. I felt like minus those turnovers, I think the defense was just put in a couple tough spots there. But that was then. This is now. I will say this. The Eagles are going to look at that film from the Chargers and see that on play action, how good Herbert was, and on third downs, he had one incompletion and he had 2 touchdowns. I do have some concerns because Saquon Barkley is way better than Omarion Hampton, and I liked him coming out of the draft. And the Chiefs were struggling off of play action, trying to account for Omarion Hampton. Well, now you got to account for Saquon Barkley. So it is, on paper, a pretty big mismatch in a lot of key areas. And if the defense for the Chiefs doesn't make a pretty big stride in how they were able to cover, and the pass rush that was literally non-existent in that game against the Chargers, if they don't turn things up a notch and get a couple of things figured out, which hopefully they will, I don't think it's going to be a bloodbath, but I have trouble in my head of being like, yeah, the Chiefs are going to win this game if they look anything like they did against the Chargers. I'm less worried, I think, about the Chiefs offense. Even though the Eagles defense is really good, you're going to probably have to put up like 30 points to win this game. I said that in the Super Bowl. People roasted me. They're like, you said it. I'm like, I said if the Chiefs win this game, in order for them to win, they need at least 30 points. And I was right. Take away that pick six, the fumble on the short field. If you got about 30, it was going to be a much closer game. But obviously it was 40-6 or whatever it was not close. So you have to play a clean game against a team as good as the Eagles. And you've got to come out firing. Another concern is just you don't have Worthy. So you don't have Rice, you don't have Worthy. You're going to have to figure it out. You don't really have a run game either, not a dynamic run game. So on paper, it's a pretty big mismatch. My head says Eagles are probably winning, but my heart says I've seen mismatches so many times in the Patrick Mahomes era, even Super Bowls against maybe the Eagles team a couple years ago or the 49ers teams for sure. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. But how do you have this game going? Let us know, because I feel like I know where you're going with this.
Well, obviously, I'm leaning heavily towards Philadelphia, but if there is an area where I think most Eagle fans are a little bit concerned here, it is. I mean, is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid going to lay another dud against the same team twice in a row? I mean, that to me is the dark horse here. Out of offense, defense, Saquon, this, whatever, Xavier Worthy out, the Eagles should be able to win. But I just do have a little bit of an angel or demon on the shoulder, whatever you want to call it, saying, is Andy Reid really going to get cooked again? Because I respect Andy Reid too much to think about that. Either way, I do think you're going to see Philadelphia win. I'm going 27-20 in this one. It could be more. It also could be less. We could, wake up in the second half and it's 14-10 or it's 10-7. It could be very low scoring where both offenses are struggling, defenses are playing well, and then it comes down to Hurts versus Mahomes in the fourth quarter, who pulls it out and gets the win. But I'll go 27-20 Philadelphia.
And next, we've got some injury updates to get into, as well as a little bit of an update on Tyreek Hill. But I did want to say that while Thomas is an Eagles fan and has the Eagles winning, look at this graphic up on screen. Almost every single analyst is going with the Eagles winning this game. It is not going to be easy, that is for sure. And I'll get into more details on how I think this game will play out later on in the week. But I did want to take a look real quick at the Chiefs injury report, specifically some of the new guys on here, or just the limited participants, rather. We already know that Jalen Royals and Xavier Worthy did not practice. Andy Reid told us that earlier, but there was a new addition to the injury report that was limited. Trey Smith with knee/illness. Hopefully he was more just limited because of illness and not knee, because against a team as good as the Eagles, you need that O-line functioning at 100% or as close to 100% as humanly possible. And then Drew Tranquill was also limited with the knee, even though he's also been dealing with back issues since training camp. So that is new, that it was his knee and not his back. You got Nick Bolton with the biceps, Hollywood Brown ankle, that's not new. Chamari Connor wrist, new. Ashton Gelati elbow, we saw him do that on special teams in the game. Omar Norman-Lott with the ankle, and then Jawan Taylor with the knee. Nothing new there, but then on the Eagles side of the ball, I did want to at least mention that Dallas Goedert has a knee sprain that has his status against the Chiefs up in the air. That would be helpful because it seems like this man or tight ends will cook the Chiefs defense. And he had, just at the bottom of this tweet here, a team high 7 catches in week 1. So if you're out Goddard, they still have plenty of other weapons, but that is one of them that could not be playing. And then I do want to briefly mention Tyreek Hill, since I talked about him in Monday's video, the interest of a potential Tyreek Hill trade because of the injuries to the wide receiver room. Well, since Xavier Worthy's probably not going to be injured for a long time, or miss a lot of time rather, he might be injured all season and need off-season surgery. I just don't think there's a need to trade for Hill. I will say this, there's some trade rumors going on regarding Tyreek Hill, and teams have been calling. Miami has received calls on Hill. This is from an article, ESPN, Jeremy Fowler talking about this, but the Dolphins did not show interest in trading him. However, maybe he could be dealt later, and they said a Chiefs reunion is a low-hanging fruit and could be what Kansas City needs. Well, in the midst of all that, he has more domestic violence allegations stemming from his divorce proceedings. It was put out by TMZ earlier this week as well, and the NFL is looking into it, saying it's standard policy for the league to review a matter such as this. So he's got more off the field allegations going on, and that's why some fans are like, yeah, please, no thank you on the Tyreek Hill thing. Appreciate his time while in Kansas City, but let the past be the past. Anyway, make sure to let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts also on the game. How are you feeling for this Sunday? What is your confidence level at this point in time? I'll do a more in-depth preview at the end of this week, but let me know your thoughts and how you're initially feeling right now. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?